stands for Women, Inspiration and Enterprise. We is really a way to support women, entrepreneurs and women in the corporate sector to become leaders. Apart from being good at your job, because I think the women in this room, and certainly, I've been through this myself, you're good at what you do, you're in a profession that you love, but it's still really hard to scale the ladder.
I think it's a little bit of passion. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of not being afraid to speak your mind. You sort of have to, I've taught myself to think in terms of outcomes. What are the possible outcomes of any action? And it dawned on me early on that, what was the worst thing that could happen? And if the worst thing that can happen is you get fired, well, that, first of all, they're not going to fire you. Anyone who's talented is not going to be fired. So speak up, speak your mind. You remember it. If the reaction to what you say is not as positive as you were hoping, you remember it for weeks. The people sitting on either side of you forget it in 5 minutes. Trust me, it's no one remembers. So, speak your mind. It's and so I was never afraid to do that. I was never afraid of talking back either. I had a boss once a new boss, and he explained to me that his boss had made an agreement with, it was the president of Pepperidge Farm, I even remember what it was, that once a month the agency would write the president of Pepperidge Farm a letter outlining what he thought the issues were to be considered and to be handled for that month. And he said, so we need to write that letter. So I went and I wrote it, and he took it from me, and I just happened to see that it was going out under his name. I grabbed it out of the typewriter. There were days when we still had typewriters. I walked into his office and I said, okay, listen up. Either I'm going to write this letter and it's going to go out under my name, or you're going to write this letter and it's going to go out under your name, but my letter is not going out under your name. And he was so startled that, this had been going on for years, that anybody would have the temerity. And it wasn't, again, because I wanted to be confrontational. I just didn't think it was right. It's just not right. Whoever writes the letter, it goes out under his name. I had another instance where I had worked on a project. I had gotten it to the point where everyone believed in it. No one was paying any attention. This was like a promotion, how do you distribute samples of a product? And it was just about to go. The next step was we were actually taking it to the CEO of the company. I was like an assistant account executive, right? No one's paying attention. And so I am literally walking on Madison Avenue with my envelope with my materials that I am going to present to the CEO of Lever Brothers, of Unilever. And these two men who were they were my boss's bosses, come up behind me and literally take the envelope. You're not going to the meeting with whatever his name was at the time. We're going. And they just walked right past me and with my envelope. And I said to myself, that will never happen again. That will never happen again. And again, it's not because I wanted to challenge people. It's not because I wanted the exposure to the CEO of Unilever for career advancement. It just wasn't right. And so I was unafraid. I just sort of thought, whatever will happen. If they don't want me here anymore, I won't be here anymore. And so it's just that's how I led my whole life, and it worked. And you can't imagine how many bad people you can stand up to that way, and they melt. Actually, they fall apart as soon as you challenge them. I had moments when I was bored to tears, and again, that's a terrible state to be in. So whenever that happened, I'd immediately go and think through what it was that I might like to do that was more challenging, and because it's better to bring people a solution than a problem. And that's how I wound up running Ogilvy Direct, which nobody wanted to do. It used to be that direct marketing was the poor sister of advertising, and the only people who ever went to direct marketing were the people who had failed in advertising. And I thought, hey, this is kind of a cool gig over here. You know, they have real results. You put a red line in, the response goes up by 20%. I was kind of intrigued by that. Just, by the way, when you put more white space for the signature, it always goes up. The response rate always goes up. I don't know why, but people might feel more comfortable writing their name with a bigger space. But anyway, I was really interested in direct marketing. And so I went to the president of the agency and I said, I'd really like to work over there, which she thought was startling because no one had ever asked to do that before. And I said, but I'd like to run something, you know, because there was the opportunity to go there and to sort of be the general manager. And so, you know, again, I was getting a little bored and I just raised my hand and say, give me a harder job. You know, that's the thing. If you think about people's careers, it's not really about managing your career. I mean, it is about it a little bit. It's about getting the good assignments. If you think about it, that's where your career really starts to move. It's when you get the good, chunky, interesting, important assignments. And that's what, you know, I always kept my eye on, not because, again, I wanted to advance, but I just thought, this is what makes it more interesting. This is how you are continually learning. And, but sometimes you gotta ask. But I think in the sense that, you know, I don't think mentoring is a program ever. It's sort of a state of being. And so, all these people I work with, both at Ogilvy and at all my clients, I always ask them questions about why they did certain things, how they thought about something. So it wasn't like, will you sign up to be my mentor? It was more, can I have a conversation with you about something I don't understand or that I'd like to understand better? And so, you know, it's amazing to me how people respond when you're interested and you ask them something like that. And so I have hundreds of mentors. I have clients who I haven't worked with in 30 years who I still talk to, you know, because we just started a relationship back then, and I consider them all my mentors. And, you know, and then there was David Ogilvy, who was sort of a really amazing person. And he and I became great friends early on. We actually, this is a story worth telling. I was 9 months pregnant at Ogilvy, and I was still working. And I looked up one day at 6 o'clock, and I was an account executive, right? There's David Ogilvy standing in my door, just staring. He had already retired and was living in France, but he used to come back for a month or so at a time. And he was just staring. And that David could just stare at you for a long time and not say a word. And I looked up and he looked at me and said, is everything all right? As if, you know, he had never seen a woman this pregnant working at Ogilvy before, and was anything dramatic about to happen. And so I said, no, I'm fine. And he came in and we started to chat. And every night at 6 o'clock for the entire 9th month of my pregnancy, David Ogilvy came to my office and we chatted about things. And so Ogilvy is a true meritocracy, which is something else that you need to look for. It's, you know, it doesn't matter kind of where you went to school or what your background was or your gender or anything like that. And so David just befriended whoever he wanted to befriend. He didn't know what anybody's title was or status, and so he would just come to my office every day, and we became great friends. And, you know, were great friends till the time he died. And so whenever, you know, I felt I needed to talk to somebody about life or careers or advertising or anything, you know, you could just go over to, David just used to hang out in the chateau near Poitiers, and he was starved for company, actually. He loved when people came. Just, oh, come, can you stay for a week? You know, so I would come for, you know, just a few days at a time and learn so much from him. in just a brief period of time, and so he was my great mentor, really.
That is such a great story. I wanted to ask about initiatives like the 3% conference and the 50-50 initiative, which are both designed to try and improve the ratio of women, particularly for creative directors and other sort of aspects of the advertising industry. So what do you think of those?
Well, I hate quotas. I mean, I just think I just instinctively rail against them. But having said that, I think we really do need to do something. And I think, to me, the question is, how much do you want it? That's what I would say to the management of so many of the companies in our industry and around it. And I love to quote this factoid about everyone who tells me that, oh, there aren't enough women in tech. We'd love to have more women, we can't find them, right? So I'm on the board of GE, General Electric, GE Aviation, right? The jet engines, right? You go, no, couldn't be many women around there. 90% of the employees of GE Aviation report into the CEO through a woman. 90%. The chief engineer of jet engines is a woman. The head of military sales is a woman. The head of supply chain, that's a real guy's thing. That's a woman. The head of contracts or something like that. And so one of my initial reactions is, if they could do it, anybody could do it. And you walk into their senior leadership team, and it's men and women. They're just everywhere, and they just made it happen. And so if they can make it happen, anyone can make it happen.
The women or the management?
The management. The management made it happen because they really wanted it to happen. And and I'll give you another example on the other end. Sort of is, I was on this women's initiative program for Deloitte, the Women's Advisory Board, and Mike Cook years ago, who was the CEO of Deloitte, had hanging in his office on a huge chart on his wall. He called it the stupid curve, and what it showed was that when Deloitte hires in at entry level, 50% of the hires are men and 50% are women. By the time you get to partner, 4% are women, and he just calls it the stupid curve. Why would we do this? And yet, having formed this program, having put together an advisory board, having done all that, they still don't have a lot of women as partners. Things that any company has to do to get more gender equality is to make sure that women are given the plum assignments, that women are in the places that make a difference to the success of the company. And we had one of those jobs open at Ogilvy, and someone was talking to me about it, and initially described 3 fantastic women, any one of whom could do that job. And then she says, and we also have this guy, who's a great guy. He's a great guy. And I said, I don't understand why he's on the list. Because if we are really serious about putting more women into visible senior management positions, then we have to be serious about it. And where we have sensational women for the greater good of this company, we need to put a woman into that spot. And if you don't see that, you don't get it. And what I worry about is that there are people who don't see it under the guise of fairness. I think, it wouldn't be fair. We've got, this guy is great. It wouldn't be fair if we didn't consider him. Well, yes, on an individual basis. But if you want to get the company to another place, then fairness is not always the thing that you have to think about. What wouldn't be fair is to put someone in that job, even if it were a woman, who wasn't capable.
Right.
But where you have 3 capable women, then take one of them and put them in that job. And the next time, find 3 more capable women and put one of them into that job. And one observation that is absolutely true that I have is where more women get into more senior positions, more women get into more senior positions. It just happens. And you can explain it any way you want, but I would just accept it. I think the shaming people into it, that sort of, that, because I don't know that they'll notice the purchasing power part. But I do think that we've at least gotten to a point where there's a certain amount of shame in not having enough, women in senior management. And so I think you've got that sort of societal push. Again, as I say, if it were easy, it would happen. It's not that there is a lack of appreciation and recognition that it's important. It's just there's not an easy way to get there, and of the 9 things they have to do, it's probably 10,
So
on
I feel
the
like it's
list.
sort of what happened with Facebook and Sheryl Sandberg was after the IPO. I think that it was because 55% of Facebook users are women. It was really the collective voice of the women, on top of the pressure of the media and everybody else, that put Sheryl on that board. And helped put Sheryl.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many CEOs I talk to who go, no, we need to have more women in our leadership. We need more women. Bring me names. Tell me how. It's just we just don't get there. And so I think, although again, I always say it's good to be impatient, but with some perspective. When I graduated from business school, remember, that wasn't that long ago. I mean, if you had told me that the CEO of IBM, General Motors, DuPont is, we're going to be women, I'd go, you're crazy. There's no way that's going to happen.
Right.
And so, I mean, we have seen things in our lifetime that I never would have expected to see. So I think it's good to continue to be impatient, but you can. I was thinking the other day about the Ivy League. It's just, who would have thought that there'd be women presidents of so many universities in the Ivy League? It's just, it just happens, but but I think it does need constant pushing.
Right. We're going to open this out to questions in a minute, but first some quick fire questions for Shelly. Mantra you live by?
Do what you love.
Best advice you've ever been given?
That again was from David Ogilvy. He said, it's only about people, and it's sort of, the people with the best people win. And all you need to do in leading any organization is make sure you have the best people, make sure you're creating an environment where they can be as successful as they can possibly be, love them, nurture them, reward them.
Worst advice you've ever heard?
Oh my God, there's so many choices. Oh God. I have to come back to that one. I don't even do that.
Okay, a quality you love most in an employee?
Curiosity and passion.
A characteristic you admire most in a leader?
Generosity.
Girls or Game of Thrones?
I'm not knowledgeable enough to answer that question.
Okay, questions, please. In the front? We have a microphone, I don't need it, but...
A lot of times women, a lot of times being direct or being motivated, sometimes as a female, is perceived as not a positive thing. How did you deal with that in your career? And what advice would you give to around that perception?
The thing is that it's, I don't think being direct, there's a difference between being direct and being confrontational. I always say, you can speak your mind and ask a direct question. You can do it nice. There's always, but I mean this. I hear some people ask questions, they're so mean.
So you had mentioned in a part tonight that some of the obstacles that you came across were that you didn't necessarily agree with the executive team you worked with or with the leaders that you were working with. How do you deal with that?
Well, I didn't think they were doing enough for, what needed to be done. It's, you kind of go, I'm not, I'm going to do more. I mean, one of the ways to deal with it is to go, I don't think this is an adequate presentation. I'm going to sit here and work on it. If anyone else wants to join me, come along. It's just, so I've always sort of led by example. I've always felt that, if I have to be the first one to say, well, I'm going to take another shot at this. I don't know if anyone else is interested in doing that with me. And you sort of get people, because either they believe in you or they don't want to leave you alone at 10 o'clock at night, or, whatever it is. So I think that is a way, that you bring people along. I mean, sometimes you do just have to, one of the great things for me about Ogilvy is that I had so much respect for all the other people I was working with. So, there were times when I would disagree with someone, but I had so much respect for that person's brain that you just go, I'm gonna go with it, because I just think he's been right so many times before, and so, you have to make your own call there, but I've never lied to a client, and I've made that clear. As if, I'll tell my creative partner, if this guy turns to me and says, do you believe in that work? I'm going to tell him. That usually gets him to change the work, by the way. It's just, it's almost a surefire technique. I said, but if he doesn't ask, I'm not going to say anything, so that's, it's going to a meeting pretty exposed, I think, is, but, I always think there are so many men who we will all describe as they've got to be the smartest person in the room. I said, I've never suffered from that. I've never thought I was the smartest person in any room. I actually am the other way. I'm so grateful that there are people who are smarter than me, so that we can come up with a good answer. And I think, humility is a really good thing to have. You have to have confidence, but you also have to have humility. And by that I mean respect for other people and other brains, and some of the boards that I sit on, everyone goes, well, is there a lot of discussion? And yeah, there's a lot of discussion, but usually there's so much mutual respect that if you have 8 people on a board who really believe in something, and you've got 3 others who are teetering, the 3 will usually go with the 8, not because they think the decision is the right one, but because they have so much respect for the 8 that they go, if these 8 people who I so respect, support this, I'm going to support it too. And that's a great group dynamic when you have that.
Speaking as a creative in advertising, you tend to look at things very proactively when you're creating, but from an industry standpoint, I've always found things to be very reactive concerning how the industry moves. So with that said, has there been a particular moment, conference, hire, just event in this industry that you think has been a catalyst for when it comes to women in advertising?
Well, I don't think that there is a single event, but I do think that there are certain moments where there's an insight on the part of a woman, where everyone turns around and thinks you needed a woman to understand that. And we were talking before about Dove. That's the kind of moment, and the great insight in the whole Dove campaign was Unilever was doing some research around the world on how women think about beauty, feel about themselves, and it all started with this shocking statistic that came back that only 2% of women in the world think they're beautiful. And it was the woman who was leading Dove who sort of walked in with this single stat and said, there's something wrong in the world. It would take a woman to feel what she felt about the fact that 98% of us don't think we're beautiful. By the way, the number was 16 in Brazil. That was the only place it was. Which I love, because they're probably right. Kimberly Clark once, where we were working on Kotex. I was the only woman in the room from both the client and the agency side, and there was a creative director who was talking about having your period as, this is a quote, the promise of fertility coursing through your body. And I looked at him, I did, and I said, you've obviously never had a period. But that was a moment, I swear, from that moment on, Kimberly Clark said, we've got to hire women. You know, it's just like, got to get more women in here. I think anything that opens up the thinking really is a moment where, you know, anyone can come in, kind of, because we don't exactly know how to figure this out. So come on in if you have an insight or you have skills in a certain area that you know, that we don't have the skills in, and so those are always good moments.
And
being in your industry and at your company for so long, what are some of the things that you do to keep your thinking fresh and kind of balance that with the expertise that you've developed?
Yeah, well, I first of all, I always used to work on more than one account. I always did, because it would just keep my brain fresh. You know, there's only so much time that you can spend thinking about shampoo or even motor oil, or, you know, whatever it is. So I always insisted that I have a portfolio of accounts. And that's one thing. It's not just the different categories, but it's the different sets of clients, so that you're thinking with different people all the time. You're thinking with different creative people. And then, you know, you switch once, you switch them out. And I used to get so involved with my clients' businesses that it was like going to a different job. I mean, when I started working on American Express, it was, you know, complete. I went from having worked on packaged goods, and you know, it's just like working in a completely different company with new dynamics, but that's because I got really interested in whatever the assignment was, and I made it like it was going to work for a new company. And then in the advertising industry, I mean, nothing has been stable in the last at least 10 or 15 years. And I always say I would have retired earlier if it weren't so interesting. I mean, you know, we're kind of making it up as we go along, because no one knows how to use all the new media and use it as advertising, and every day there's a new thing you can do. I always think about the fact that when I went and did that direct marketing gig, that everything we tried to do in direct marketing was try to simulate a conversation with a prospect or a customer in real time. We couldn't, but that's the way we think about it. That's the way we think about the language, that's the way we think about the timing. And so now, here we are. You can have a real conversation with a prospect or a customer in real time. Of course, what we do is put small space print ads on screen, but that's a whole other conversation. So you know, the possibility of that is so extraordinary that you can't help but, you know, kind of be interested every morning in what are we going to do next. You've got to be ready for opportunity. I mean, that's the real trick to moving forward. And when someone puts something really exciting in front of you, a lot of people first go, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if that industry is developed enough. I don't know if the organization is right. These are all good questions, and they're all good things to make you pause. But at the end of the day, you gotta jump. And every new opportunity is scary. The bigger it is, the scarier it is. And I think that if you do the pluses and the minuses and you're just never going to come out anywhere. And so the first thing I'd say, where opportunity is put in front of you, just say yes.